So this evening we'll be discussing White Goat, White Ram by W.S. Merwin.
Yeah, and then hopefully we're going to get on to some more poetry. Okay, all right, so I'm not going to read the poem completely because nobody's going to understand it. So we'll read it bit by bit. And also I should say, I looked up on the internet if this poetic device has a name. So in this poem, he'll change subjects mid-sentence. Mm-hmm. Okay. Has anyone have critics named this device? And they haven't. I'm pretty sure they haven't.
Okay.
So the gaiety of three winds is a game of green shining, of gray gold play in the holly bush, among the rocks on the hillside. And if ever the earth was shaken, say a moment ago, or whenever it came to be. All right, so let's stop right there.
That's fine.
So, hold on. Okay, so, go ahead.
I'm sorry, as a pretext, it's important to point out that a lot of Merwin's early poetry was ecologically and naturally informed.
All right. Yeah,
I just want to point that out.
Okay. So, if you look at among the rocks on the hillside, and then he says, and if ever the earth was shaken, I really think they don't belong to the same sentence. Even though there's a comma separating, they don't belong to the same thought. So in these first three lines, the gaiety of the three winds, that's the subject.
Yes.
And the predicate, or the main verb is. So it is a game of green shining.
Yes.
And then this clause of gray gold play, so that modifies the game. Mm-hmm. In the holly bush, this is an adverb clause. Among the rocks, also adverb on the hillside. And then he goes, and if ever the earth was shaken. I really think right there he's changed subjects. Do you agree with that?
Well, for the time being, I think so. I think it's also we're dealing with a language of play in the natural world, of joy, of cavorting, that kind of thing, which may carry through into the idea of the innocence of the natural world. But it's important to keep in mind that this is opening on a playful note, where we're attributing playfulness to the natural world.
Okay, so I summarize the first three lines as, there is a good game.
Yeah, no, I think that's reasonable, keeping in mind that good game is applied to the natural world. It's kind of an anthropomorphization.
Yeah,
but
yes, he's using green shining, greenness appears to be a good color word right here.
Yes, also with the gray and the gold.
Gray and gold play is a positive word.
So we can say the green of the vegetation. Gray and gold, the sunlight, that kind of thing, sure.
Okay, so the next three lines.
Okay.
And if ever the earth was shaken, say a moment ago, or whenever it came to be. So
yes.
I summarize that as, if there should be a disaster, earth was shaken, kind of like disaster.
Right, if there's any, or maybe not even disaster, just maybe some very significant sweeping change to the natural world, very sudden disaster or otherwise.
Okay. Next two lines, only the leaves and the spread sea still betray it, trembling.
I guess we can say that there is, perhaps is dealing with the interconnection of all the different natural phenomenon, if you will. The earth trembles, it results in some disturbance of the sea, the leaves, etc. So we're dealing with the play of nature, the playfulness of nature, and the interdependence of all of these natural phenomena.
Yeah.
Okay.
And their tale betides the faintest of small voices almost still. So I summarized that so here he's changing subjects.
Yes.
I summarized that as their tale almost still, and then he kind of he doesn't finish that thought. And we don't know who their refers to at this moment.
Bear with me just a moment. Their tale. I think I think there's this idea that the natural world is making an attempt at communication. I don't want to get too far ahead. I've always felt this poem to be about the disconnection of humanity and nature. I don't want to go deeply into that. But the faintest of small voices almost still, it just may be that we can't. This disconnect means we're not listening to nature anymore. Does that make sense?
Well, okay, so you're saying that we're not listening to nature?
I think it's underlining the just that general disconnect, if you will.
Well, I want more evidence.
Oh, I agree, and I think we get that evidence as we move along.
Okay.
But let's see. Go ahead.
Before I agree to that hypothesis. Okay. So, a road winds among the gray walks, over the hill, arrives from out of sight, from nowhere we know, of an uncertain color. So, I just summarized this as a road to nowhere.
Well, do you remember Robert Frost's one poem, a road goes in two separate directions in the forest?
Yeah, who doesn't remember that one?
Well, exactly. And I'm thinking maybe the road itself is metaphorical for life, for life. From nowhere we know of certain color. Yeah, it's interesting. A road of uncertain color. How does that strike you? Because, I mean, if you're looking at a road, this is why I think there's a metaphorical aspect to.
Well, he also says earlier here, it winds among the gray rocks.
Right, yes. Again, I think it may be a metaphor for the path of one's life in general, but I'm going to refrain from really screwing that, really asserting that.
Well, remember, he says here, from nowhere we know, so ignorance, out of sight, could also be slightly related to ignorance.
Right. Just in general, the unknown of the past, the unknown of the future.
Yeah.
And of an uncertain color, of course, it's just very difficult to make these discernments about the road of life.
And also grayness is often associated with obscurity.
Right, of course.
Okay. All right. I'm going to read the next 10 lines. I think they are related, these next 10 lines.
All right, go ahead.
And she stands at the side nearer the sea, not far from the brink, legs straddled wide over the swinging udder, her back and belly slung like a camp of hammocks, her head raised, the narrow jaw grinding sideways, ears flapping sideways, eyes wide apart like the two moons of Mars at their opposing. So broadly is she blind, who has no names to see with. Over her shoulder she sees not summer, not the idea of summer, but green meanings.
What do you think?
Well, I summarized this as she stands by the sea, she sees green meanings.
Okay.
Now, we don't know, this is the first we've heard of a woman. This is the first time he's referred to a woman in the poem.
This isn't a woman, I don't believe.
Huh?
This is a cow.
Oh, you think it might be a cow?
Yeah, I think it's a cow. Yeah, look, swinging udder, that narrow jaw, ears flapping sideways. I think we're dealing with an essence.
Yeah,
I think we're dealing with an essence like a dumb animal, who. So she is blind. She has no names to see with. We could say she doesn't possess the conceptual apparatus that a human being would.
Yeah.
Ideas, if you will. It says over her shoulder she sees not summer nor the idea of summer. This goes back to the road. She's not really looking to the future or to the past. She's concerned with the immediate present being green meanings. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we're dealing with, again, this dumb animal. I don't use dumb in a derogatory sense, but we're dealing with this. We're dealing with a cow, basically.
Right.
A cow that, because she is not human, she's not burdened with considerations for the future or the past, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. She's concerned just with her immediate surroundings, which we see with green meanings, quote unquote.
All right, good.
So we started with let's just go from but green meanings. This is what the cow is seeing.
Yeah. Okay. But green meanings, shadows, the gold height of now, familiar, the sense of long day warmth, of sparse grass in the open game of the winds. So, all right. So she doesn't see summer. She doesn't see the idea of summer, but she sees green meanings, shadows, the gold height of now. I guess that's just she sees the present. She's
right.
Animals. Some people believe that animals. Well, they're probably right. Animals don't really think about the future that much.
Right, of course.
This is why, like, if you kill a horse, the horse right next to it isn't going to start fidgeting.
Right. I mean, I know that animals have the capacity for memory and for anticipation, but they are far more than us. They are grounded in the present. The present is, it says, the air that is plenitude. For animals, meaning in the world is primarily rooted in the present.
Mm-hmm.
I also like to point out that it says, of sparse grass in the open game of the winds. Once again, we're referring to the playfulness of nature, if you will.
Right. So nature is a positive thing.
Yes.
Okay. An air that is plenitude, describing itself in no name, all known before, perceived many times before, yet not remembered, or at most felt as usual.
Right. Again, cows, animals lack that conceptual apparatus that we have. Their experience of the natural world is far more direct.
Right. Even the kids, grown now and gone, are forgotten as though by habit.
Yes. So the animal has ultimately forgotten its own offspring, if you will. They don't have that same level of attachment to offspring, to family, etc.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he on the other side of the road, hooves braced among spurge and asphodel, tears the grass, the gray grass at its roots, his massive horns tossing delicately, as by long habit, as by habit learned, or without other knowledge, and without question inherited.
I love, I'm not sure what spurge is, I think it's kind of grass. But asphodel, asphodel is a flower in Greek myth found in the vales and meadows of Hades. So it was interesting that they included asphodel right now. I hesitate to give a strict interpretation of its presence in the poem, but I think it may have some significance in that we're discussing death, for instance, life and death. Hooves braced among spurge and asphodel. Perhaps death is seen, it's either unanticipated or it's not something that an animal approaches with great fear, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I like how it says, tossing delicately as by long habit or habit learned. Animals pass along instincts, if you will, versus quote-unquote knowledge. They don't carry those conceptual burdens that humankind do, that the humans do. Habit learned is sufficient for the existence of these animals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Okay, so and also I just want to add, he's continuing to harp on the theme of these animals are ignorant. So.
Yes, but ignorant not necessarily in a negative sense.
Yeah, ignorant of typical human things.
Sure, I got it. Actually, they'll get you run away if I do it.
Okay, so where were we?
We are right here.
Yeah, when the bull... Okay. Or found at first he found the air, the first daylight, first milk at the paths, the pen, the seasons. Okay, so when the bull first found air and milk.
Right, and these things are passed down by this habit, by instinct. How to function in the world is conveyed animals genetically, if you will.
Okay, they are white. These, as we should say, those are white who remember nothing. So, kind of cryptic. So, those who are white remember nothing.
They are white. These, as we should say, are they referring to the kids? Do you remember?
Could be the. I mean, cows are white.
Right. Well, it mentioned the kids previously, the kids that are born. We should say are those who are white who remember nothing. So it's like innocence equates to that memory of nothing. Innocence really is entailed by lack of memory, lack of the cognitive apparatus I was mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if we take an infant today, if an infant is born, we will call that infant innocent because they have no memory. They don't have. I keep using that term, cognitive apparatus. It's a clumsy term, but I'll just stick with it. So we're basically, this goes back to saying that in the animal kingdom you find that innocence because there's not that memory. Although, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay. And we, for our uses, call that innocence.
Right.
So that our gracelessness may have the back of a goat to ride away upon so that when our supreme gesture of propitiation has obediently been raised, it may be the thicket-snared ram that dies instead of the son.
Yes.
So summarize that as so that we can ride on a goat, so that a ram dies instead of a son. So we have these result clauses, so that, et cetera, and they're not really all that related to the previous. So in most result clauses, you have do this, do that, so that, etc. So here we have so that we can ride on a goat, and so that a ram dies instead of the son. I mean, that's a result clause that doesn't really relate to the previous sentence, which is something we call that innocence. So,
well, I think that this is definitely a reference to the episode of Abraham in the book of Genesis. Abraham takes Isaac up on Mount Moriah.
Oh yeah.
To sacrifice him, and when he makes the motion for sacrificing, God says, "No, sacrifice the ram, not the son." I think that this section of 4 lines is where we get the title "White Ram, White Goat." Let's see. Yeah. Our supreme gesture of propitiation is sacrificing that which is most dear to us, sacrificing innocence. God acknowledges that, and then the ram is killed versus the son, or the kid, or the innocent being.
But even though he's alluding to this Abraham story, it's not really clear why he's doing it.
Well,
what point he's trying to make.
Well, I mean, obviously there's that symbolic link with the goat and the ram. Let me see. Our graceless may have the back of a goat. Yeah, let's shelve it for now, although I do think it's a very important section. It goes back, it falls back on the notion of innocence.
All right.
Oh, actually, I think I have it. So, innocence, the animal is well, shoot. We'll come back to it.
Okay.
We'll come back to it.
So, even that we may frame the sense that is now into a starred figure of last things of our own end. So here's another result clause. Yeah, so the previous result clauses were so that we can ride on a goat, so that a ram dies instead of a son, and now we have so that we can interpret the present into a figure of last things. And figure of last things I would take to be a metaphor for just
death.
Or maybe just understanding the real nature of things.
Yes, some kind of eschaton. I'm seeing that frame the sense that is now. This is where we're contextualizing our present in terms of some end, in terms of the future, some great design, which, according to this poem, the animals are not doing.
Yeah, so, and frame the sense. I interpret frame the sense as just interpret.
Or even just frame, or just contextualizing present experience in terms of this end, this design, whatever.
Okay. As far as the use of the word starred there, into a starred figure, I don't really understand the use of the word starred here unless it's just like an amazing thing. So a starred figure of last things would be...
Do you get a starred figure, maybe just a sense of grandeur or the culmination of a great design?
Yeah.
Which would go back to the Christian theme, eschaton, end of the world, and then we see it with that would counter at the very beginning, which was the metaphor with Abraham on the mountain, Mount Moriah, as I recall.
Okay. And there by these beasts know ourselves one from another. So. Maybe I interpreted that incorrectly. So I originally wrote and distinguish ourselves, but now I'm thinking that by looking at these cows, we get a better understanding of ourselves.
Well, Merwin was, I think he had environmental interests in the beginning. Maybe our attitude toward these animals, our attitude toward innocence, is how we distinguish one from another, if you will.
This is actually a longer poem than I thought.
We'll do what we can, and we can always have a part 2, I guess.
Oh, God.
Let's just keep going a little bit longer.
Yeah. No, I want to get it finished.
Okay.
Okay, some to stay in the safety of the rock, but many, on the other hand, to be dashed over the perilous brink.
Right.
So
These are by these beasts we know ourselves. Like some beasts, we may stay to play it safe, hence stay in the safety of the rock. Others of us may be far more venturesome, far more active versus passive, that kind of thing.
yeah, okay. There is no need, even that they should be gentle, for us to use them to signify gentleness, for us to lift them as a sign invoking gentleness, conjuring by their shapes the shape of our desire, which without them would remain without a form and nameless.
Yes.
So I interpret this as we need not use them to signify gentleness and our desires.
This has to be stays in the context of our disconnect from the natural world. If we were properly connected, we wouldn't need to take animals as symbols of something else. Does that make sense? Think of like the medieval bestiaries, where all these animals, they would signify certain things, or in like astrology, they would actually be indicators, pointers to some other concept, some other entity. If we're going to connect with the natural world, we need to take these entities as they are, versus a symbolic of something else.
Yeah, so Merwin he's criticizing something here. He's criticizing our use of animals.
Precisely.
Okay. For our uses also are a dumbness, a mystery. So this is a clause. This is like because, or like it is also the case that our uses also. So we also don't need to. I interpreted this earlier as because our intentions are mysterious, but now I'm kind of thinking that's wrong.
Our uses also are a dumbness, a mystery. I think this just refers back to the previous section. We're not actually communicating with these animals, interacting with the natural world so much.
Yeah. We don't understand what we're doing.
Precisely.
With our uses.
Right, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay. Which, like a habit, stretches ahead of us and was here before us, so again.
Think back to the earlier stanza with the road, of unknown origin at unknown destination. If we take that as synonymous with life, then this is, the habit stretches ahead of us. I'm sorry, one moment. Yeah, so our lives are characterized by this dumbness, this mystery.
But also, this sentence is a simile. It's saying our uses are like a habit which stretches ahead of us and was here before us, so again. I kind of think he's criticizing. I mean, this is a negative.
Oh, most certainly.
He's criticizing how we use our uses. He says it's like a habit which stretches ahead of us. So,
precisely.
I mean, rather vague and obscure, but we can at least understand that it's slightly negative.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I agree. I mean, the tone is most certainly critical.
Yeah. We use these to designate what was before us, since we cannot see it in itself.
Right. I think this deals with memory, really. We don't see it in itself, so we retain it in memory, and we assign and we classify, and we I think it's primarily, since we no longer have this thing present to our senses, we have certain methods of remembering it in the past.
Okay. For who can recognize and call by true names familiarly the place where before this he was? So kind of like, because after all, who can really know where he was?
Precisely.
So it's another criticism. So he's saying like, we're doing these things, but
it's kind of futile.
It's kind of futile because look, hey, after all, who really knows what's going on really?
Precisely.
Who knows where they really were? Okay. Though for 9 months or the world's full age he housed there, yet it seems that by such a road, arriving from out of sight.
I would say that refers to the womb.
Yeah, like so. Even though he was even though he was there for 9 months in the womb,
Yes.
he still can't know where he was.
Right, because this precedes cognition, this precedes memory, all sorts of things. In that womb, he was innocent.
Okay. From nowhere we know, we may have come, and the figure as shapes we may have been. Yeah, so we may have come from nowhere.
It was like that oblivion, if you will. Sure.
Only to them, the road is less than a road, though it divides them, a bit of flat space merely, perhaps not even a tilling that leads elsewhere. A tiling?
I think so.
A tiling that leads elsewhere, except when they are driven along it. Yeah, so this clearly refers to the cows.
Well, I think it also refers to human beings as well. The road is less than a road. It is just a space merely, and they're driven along it. So, are we driven by forces? Are we controlled by the forces around us, or are we choosing our destination, our path?
Well, I mean, I kind of think that they here definitely refers to the cows.
Where? What do you want?
Only to them?
No. I think shapes we may have been. I think it's referring to us. The shapes we the shapes we may have been. Yeah.
No, I kind of think so.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
For the cows, the road, it's not really a road. It's just a bunch of it's a bit of flat space. It has tiling.
Right.
It leads elsewhere.
Except when they are driven. If we are driven along in life, we can't really foresee the end point, the end goal. I think this is more of an existential comment on how our lives are led. Do we allow ourselves to be driven along, or do we actually, via our own volition, choose a path, so to speak?
Okay, so I sort of see your point. You could say that this road, we believe it leads to somewhere, but
yes.
We're wrong. We're not really understanding.
Well, it could lead somewhere, but again, when it says a road that is less than a road, I think it just deals with volition. How are we in our life? Are we being controlled by other forces compelled down a certain road, or are we choosing our path, so to speak?
But where he says it divides them, I kind of think that the road is dividing the cows.
No, I don't think so. The road is less than a road, though it divides them. I think that just means I don't think it's like a physical division. I just think it's a distinction more than anything else.
Well, maybe
there are those who choose, and there are those who are forced down the road.
Okay, maybe in this next part he's going to clear it up, because he continues to talk about them.
Sure, of course.
For direction is to them the paths their own preference and kinds have made and follow. Routes through no convenience in world of ours, but through their own sense and mystery. For direction is to them the path. So I interpret this as direction to them is merely the path dictated by their desire.
Let's see. So when I see own preferences and kinds have made, let me see. That one is curious. Okay, so direction is to them the paths, except when they are driven along. A tiling that leads elsewhere, for direction is to them the paths of their own preferences and kinds have made and follow. That's in reference to the parties that are choosing their own way, if you will, versus being driven along by other forces. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I kind of think he's saying the paths, they're not objective paths. These are not
predetermined paths.
Predetermined paths which lead to something objectively good. It's just kind of like a preference. You know, we had a desire to get somewhere. It wasn't necessarily a place that was objectively good to get to.
Right. I think this section right here pertains to parties who do in fact choose their own path, because it's in accord with their preferences, if you will. Routes through no convenience in world of ours. I think the convenience can be a force governing a person's path in life. the easy way, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what we're seeing here, and that path of convenience is basically comprises the world of ours, basically, where we're all being driven and controlled by other forces. If someone has an individual, whether it be innovation or original thinking or the courage to follow their own path, I think that's what we're dealing with here at the moment.
All right.
The distinction between those who are controlled and those who lead lives and whose lives are led by other forces.
Okay. So, mark this. For though they assume now the awkward postures of illustrations for all our parables, yet the mystery they stand in is still as far from what they signify as from the mystery we stand in.
Right.
So, I interpret this as, though they make awkward illustrations of our parables, their mystery is far different from our mystery.
I think this goes back to, when we're dealing with the natural world, when we're dealing with creatures in the natural world, we're treating them as symbols of something else. And I think that's what's saying here. When we do that, we put them in awkward postures of illustrations for our parables. And this is a perspective we have to force ourselves away from if we're going to reconnect with the natural world and deal with the nature as nature. Does that make sense?
Not really.
Okay, well, you recall this...
But hold on.
Sure.
I do want to point out that by now I think it's clear that they refers to the cows or the animals.
I'm not going to... in some cases, yes. In some cases, no.
Because he's saying they assume postures for our parables. They serve as instruments to make our parables.
Right.
Yet... And earlier he was talking about stories or something.
I think we treat the natural world in terms of instrumentality, if you will. Whether they're symbols of something else, whatever. And he's saying there's this mystery that they stand in. There's some significance to these animals, to creatures that is hidden from us.
Right.
Because of our instrumentalist approach, we are making them symbols of something. They are the awkward postures of illustration. And note the use of the word awkward.
Yeah. So he's criticizing how we're using the animals.
Precisely.
And he's pointing out, hey, they stand in a different type of mystery.
That's correct. It's a mystery that at present we cannot access. And I'd like to go back to the opening lines of the poem when it just indicates play in that actual world. Mm-hmm. Being grounded in the very present, having that enjoyment versus, planning for the future, memories, being driven along, all these different motivations, etc., etc., etc.
Okay, so it is the sign we make of them, not they, that speaks from their dumbness, that our dumbness may speak.
Right.
So our dumbness speaks because of our interpretation
Correct.
Of their dumbness.
The fault is ours.
Yeah.
Okay.
There in the thin grass, a few feet away, they browse beyond words.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they search for words in the grass?
No. I don't think they're searching for words. They just have no need of words.
They browse beyond... Oh, yeah, they browse beyond words.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. For a mystery is that for which we have not yet received or made the name, the terms that may enclose and call it.
Precisely.
So a mystery is that which we have not named.
Oh, well, I'll point out that we're dealing with that cognitive burden with names and concepts, etc. You go back up from it real fast. Yeah, here. So the mystery that these animals, the natural world, is rooted in, it's entirely removed from our names, our categories, our classifications, our logic, yada, 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 yada.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And by virtue of such, we stand beyond earthquake and wind and burning, and all the uncovenanted terror of becoming, and beyond the small voice. So I kind of take that as, because of that, we avoid disaster.
Because of what?
The mystery which we have not named. Although that doesn't make much sense.
Right.
Because, he's criticizing what we're doing, but now he's saying we avoid disaster. So we stand beyond earthquake. I take that as a metaphor for avoiding earthquakes.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the uncovenanted terror of beginning entails earthquake and wind and burning. By virtue of immersion in this mystery, We remove ourselves from fear of death, disaster, the future, that kind of thing. We only fear earthquake and wind and disaster when we're constantly projecting into the future. If we're grounded strictly in the here and now, like these animals, for instance, and their joy and their play, these are things that just simply don't stress these animals, really.
But it should be the animals that are standing beyond the earthquake, not us.
No, look, we stand beyond the earthquake by virtue of the mystery that animals share and beyond concept and anticipating the future and that kind of thing. We then stand beyond earthquake and wind and burning. Only that's one of the benefits of challenging the...
But if that were correct, I think he would say we would. If we would understand this mystery, we would stand beyond.
Well, it could be said there are parties that have, in fact, attained that frame of mind. Maybe it's a capacity that he's describing?
I don't know. All right, but let's
yeah, sure.
continue. And on another hand, as it were a little above us, there are the angels. We are dumb before them and move in a different mystery. So we are ignorant of the workings of angels.
Of course.
All right. But may there be another road we do not see as a road, straight, narrow, or broad, or the sector of a circle, or perhaps all these, where without knowing it we stand on one side or another. So
there are roads, there are paths in life we're just not anticipating. We don't perceive all the options that we have.
And they're better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we may see them as something else, like the sector of a circle, for instance, without realizing there may be options that we may have.
Okay. I have known such a way, but at moments only, and when it seemed I was driven along it, and along no other that my preference or kind had made.
Bear with me. So occasionally a party will have a glimpse of this new path, of this new lifestyle, this new perspective, but habits, routine suddenly makes it, kind of obscures it, and we continue per usual.
No, I have known such a way, but only when it seems I was forced to be on it. Yeah. I have known such a way, but only when I was driven along it, or I was forced to be on it.
Right.
Or along no other that my preference or kind had made.
Sure.
Yeah. So Merwin himself, or the narrator, he understood things, but only when he was forced.
Yeah, he sees possibilities, but only when they're brought to his attention by someone else.
Okay. And of these others above us, we know only the whisper of an elusive sense, infrequent meanings and shadows, analogies with light and the beating of wings.
So again, these things aren't broadly apparent to us, not obvious to us. We get hints, we get intimations, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Suggestions, if you will.
Yeah, we barely sense them.
Correct.
We only know the whisper. Okay. Yet now, perhaps only a few feet away in the shaking leaves, they wait beyond our words, beyond earthquake, whirlwind, fire, and all the uncoveted terror of becoming. So perhaps these better ways are closer than we thought.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But they're beyond words, earthquake, wind, fire. They're beyond fear of death, fear of catastrophe. They're beyond any vocabulary, memory, conceptual apparatus, etc.
Okay, yeah. All right. And beyond the small voice, we cannot know, and we are not what we signify, but in what sign may we be innocent? We cannot know, and we are not what we mean. We are not what we signify.
Right.
But in what sign? Okay. But let us hope we're innocent. Okay. For out of our dumbness we would speak for them, give speech to the mute tongues of angels.
I love that. Give speech to the mute tongues of angels. It sounds like a contradiction, but for out of our dumbness.
Yeah.
I think when we say out of our dumbness, and that pertains to just shutting down all of the habits of a lifetime, conceptual apparatus, etc. We just we stop trying to impose our will on the world, our designs, our understanding, if you will.
Yes. Listen, more than the sea's thunder foregathers in the great cliffs. The roots of our hair stir like the leaves of the holly bush, where now not games the wind ponders, but impatient glory's fire. So he's saying, like, listen, well, let me just read the final 3 lines.
Of course.
And we go stricken suddenly, humble, and the covering of our feet offends, for the ground where we stand is holy. So he's kind of like saying, like, hey, look, we stand on holy ground.
Yes.
Listen, okay.
It sounds like it's a revelation, doesn't it? Impatient glories, fire, the sea's thunder, and it's only by this revelation that we suddenly realize, hey, we're walking on holy ground. The world is holy despite our impositions, our logic, our theologies, that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, so if I were to summarize the poem in less than 5 sentences.
Yeah.
Hold on a second.
Sorry, I should press over here.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, sweetie.
Okay, so summarize the poem in 5 sentences. These animals, these cows, they have a better understanding of nature. We're using them incorrectly. We don't. And then, all right, so we're using the animals incorrectly. The angels, they too have a knowledge of the way things really are, but we can't hear them. And then, hey, look out, we're standing on holy ground.
Yeah, I would also say, we are completely disconnected from the natural world, and we're completely disconnected from ourselves, from our bodies, from...
Well, I don't want to go that far. I don't want to say completely.
Okay, there is still some disconnect, a significant disconnect from the natural world. We make all these impositions. We try to assign significance to the natural world rather than recognizing what that what that significance should be. We're making all these impositions, and we ultimately have to shed ourselves of those impositions, recognize ourselves as part of the natural world.
Okay, good. Now, I think we should also point out that in a lot of these poetry podcasts, they never really say if they like the poem. They don't. They do all this analysis. I mean, it is clear that they like the poem, but they never come out and say, why is this a good poem?
Carl, did you like this poem?
Yeah. All right. So, what I like about the poem, it has a mystical feel to it. It has a loftiness.
Sure, of course.
It's got great language to it. So let me just point out some of my my favorite lines. Okay, so eyes wide apart like the 2 moons of Mars at their opposing. That's good. It's not, I've seen better, but it's pretty good. Right. And then also, we stand beyond earthquake and wind and burning.
Yes.
And the uncovenanted terror of becoming.
Chaos.
Yeah. So there's great language in here. He strikes a good balance between, I want to be challenged, but I also want to understand it. I want to succeed at the end.
Right.
So at the end, I think we do succeed. I think probably a lot of people would have given up on this poem and said, forget it. It's too hard. I've got better things to do with my time.
Well, the fact that we're devoting time to this just indicates our commitment to the art form in general, which is very important. You can't approach poetry, to my thinking, you can't just do it on an academic level. You have to have some manner of passion.
Wrap up what you're saying about this poem. Like, anything else you want to say about it?
Well, I for one very much like the poem. We had to put in the work for it. I think together we've reached a pretty good analysis. I'm sure we haven't hit every detail, but Merwin always was exceptional. The style of poetry changes throughout the years, and this particular poem is one of his most early. but already we get a sense of great maturity and insight as a poet. So I 4 stars in my opinion.
Okay, good.